You know those shows you start thinking it's just another monster of the week, and suddenly you're knee-deep in an ancient war between supernatural kingdoms, god-powered babies, and Templar weapons? Yeah, Grimm did exactly that, and somehow made it all feel completely normal. Nick started off as an ordinary detective in Portland, and ended up facing the apocalypse with a magic stick and a zombie army on his tail. Over the course of the series, we saw vengeful witches, Zen werewolves, moms coming back from the dead out of nowhere, and a daughter with end-of-the-world level powers. There was betrayal, brawls, magic, and conspiracy theories, all packed into 6 seasons of pure supernatural madness. So in today's video, we're diving back into the wild journey of our unlucky but totally badass Grimm. Hit that subscribe button, grab your magic key, and get ready. This recap is heading deep into the Black Forest, and there's no turning back. Nick Burkhardt thought being a homicide detective in Portland already came with enough surprises, until his aunt showed up unexpectedly, towing a trailer full of secrets and a past that would make any group therapy session look like a church picnic. While investigating the grotesque murder of a college student torn apart in the woods, Nick starts seeing things. Faces morphing into nightmare-fueled Germanic creatures, claws, fangs, and that classic feeling that sanity might be on vacation. Marie, who didn't just drop by for coffee, drops a small detail. Nick is a Grimm, as in the fairy tale kind, only with more monster slang and less bedtime stories. As he struggles to process that his DNA comes with a curse allowing him to see beyond the veil, Nick meets Monroe, a bloodbath who's supposed to be a granny gobbling wolf but prefers yoga and antique clocks. His new furry BFF helps him track down a kidnapped girl, abducted by another bloodbath, this one more sociopath than soul searcher. Together, they follow the scent of doom to a secluded cabin. In the showdown, Nick rescues the girl and sends the big bad wolf to his eternal spa day, but not all ends in triumph. Marie gets a lethal dose of sedative, courtesy of a nurse with the look of a telenovela villain. Just before slipping into a coma, she drops a bombshell. Nick's parents didn't die in an accident, they were murdered, and as a final parting gift, she hands him a mysterious key. While Marie clings stubbornly to life, Nick dives headfirst into his new grim reality, and things kick off with a modern horror classic. A young couple breaks into a cabin in the woods, and, surprise, only one of them makes it out alive. Gilda escapes, traumatized, while Rocky ends up as bear food, literally. The investigation leads Nick to the Rabes, a family that gives off serious, we keep secrets in the basement vibes. Monroe, ever helpful and blessed with a supernatural GPS, discovers the area is littered with Jaeger bear tracks, bear-like shapeshifters with a disturbing fondness for outdated, bloody traditions. They're in the midst of the Row Hats, a brutal rite of passage that's more blood ritual than quinceañera. Barry Rabe, the RPG-obsessed teen, abducted Rocky and Gilda with his buddies to play a twisted game of hunt the humans before sundown. When Nick discovers the cave where the hunting club is gathered, Barry's father finally shows a glimmer of sanity and decides to help. Nick arrives just in time to stop the slaughter, but chaos still erupts. Diana Rabe, the mama bear, literally transforms to protect her cub and ends up being killed. A tragic end to a tradition that should have been nothing more than an urban legend. As Frank Rabe faces the weight of losing his wife and ruining his son's future, Marie wakes up only to be attacked once again. Monroe steps in and saves the day, but not entirely. In Nick's arms, Marie takes her final breath, leaving him with a parting message that sounds more like zombie apocalypse advice.
Remember trust your instincts.
With that, the torch, or the curse, is officially passed to Nick, now the last Grimm standing. And as the loss still stings, a new threat begins to stir in the shadows of Portland. Nick had already grown accustomed to his double life as a Grimm. His days were split between police reports and late-night visits to Marie's old trailer. That is, until a rare coin jewelry shop is hit in a robbery that's as bloody as it is ambitious. 3 thieves break in looking for specific coins, but what does the jeweler do? He eats the coins to hide them from the crooks. A genius, I'd say. The coins? Gleaming pieces marked with a swastika on one side and a lion's head on the other. Nick and Hank find out the hard way. Anyone who touches the damn thing starts acting like they've been injected with a megadose of liquid megalomania. Farley Colt, the surviving thief, isn't just another crook. He knew Marie. He was in Rhinebeck when Nick's parents were killed. And according to him, these coins aren't just pretty. They're cursed. Forged from the gold of the Nemean lion itself, they're said to carry the power to bend others to your will, but they slowly destroy whoever holds them. Renard and Hank, corrupted by the coin's touch, spiral into fits of aggression. Meanwhile, Soledad Marquesa, the third thief, opts for a more pragmatic route. He kills a cop, steals his uniform, and infiltrates the precinct. Tension explodes. Renard takes a bullet. Soledad escapes with the coins, and Nick, with a sense of justice as firm as a Western hero's jaw, ends the game with a clean shot. Before falling, Soledad plays one last card. He was involved in the death of Nick's parents, and with that, a link is finally closed. Meanwhile, the trailer has become a journal. Now more aware of the dark roots of the Wesen world, Nick records his notes on the Klaustreich, a creature that looks like a nightmare given form, razor-sharp teeth, and questionable morals included. But there's no time for pages to cool. A wounded and bleeding Brit stumbles into Rosalee's shop. It's Ian Harmon, a name that once made waves in the resistance against the Verat, and he's back. Across town enters Edgar Waltz, the kind of killer who turns words into threats and threats into corpses. He plants false leads, eliminates informants, and infiltrates police investigations under the guise of a witness. He's hunting Ian, and now Nick and Hank are part of his deadly game. Monroe and Rosalee work to keep Ian alive. Waltz proposes a truce, a so-called Friedenreden, a gentleman's agreement amidst chaos. But this is just theater. He wants Ian in 24 hours, or the bodies will start piling up. Under pressure, Nick decides to protect Ian. He hatches a plan with Monroe and Reginald, the forger, but Waltz, a seasoned scoundrel, is one step ahead. He escalates things, terrorizes, kidnaps Rosalee, and forces a showdown. In the spice shop, the fight is tight and suffocating. Aware of the looming danger, Ian kills Waltz and surrenders to Nick, but Nick, staging a fake arrest to shield his allies, secretly lets Ian go and urges him to disappear.
What are you doing? Saving my friends.
Sometime later, Hank struggles with sleepless nights. His sanity has been hanging by a thread. Nick tries to keep up, but something far more dangerous is approaching. Akira Kimura, a ghost-like assassin tied to the secret organization known as Dragon's Tongue, is crossing continents in search of the same cursed coins. Meanwhile, a private investigator is found beheaded in a Portland hotel. Crime scene photos show Nick, Hank, and Renard. They're being watched. Juliet, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy, does a favor for Adeline by examining her cat, Magique, just a scratch, or so it seems. But the wound begins to affect Juliet in bizarre ways. Dizziness, confusion, a downward spiral. Kimura breaks into Renard's apartment, drawing blood and secrets. He learns Colt had the coins, but the man is already dead. Renard survives. The housekeeper doesn't. The tattoo on Kimura, an eggish Jalmer, marks him as an ancient lethal force. Terrified by Juliet's condition, Nick decides it's time for the truth. He takes her to the trailer, shows her everything. The books, the Wesen, old films featuring Hitler and the Grimms. Adeline, he says, is a witch, a hexenbeast. Juliet can't take it. She thinks Nick has lost his mind. Monroe steps in to help. He woges for her, and she faints into a coma. Now Nick is racing against time. The toxin from Adeline's cat was intentional. Monroe searches for an antidote. Adeline vanishes, and Kimura shows up again, this time at Nick's home. The fight is brutal. And then, something impossible happens. A woman appears and kills Kimura, and she reveals herself to be Kelly Burkhardt, his mother, alive.
It's me.
Mom?
And with her return, everything Nick thought he knew begins to unravel. The secret war has become personal. Juliet lies between life and death. His mother has returned from the grave, and the past is kicking down the door. Nothing like starting the day after a long break with 3 poor souls from the Harbor Patrol getting shredded by a creature straight out of Disney's worst nightmares. Of the 3, only one makes it out alive. Enter Kelly Burkhardt, handing out life lessons like a boss. She throws a chemical in Kimura's face, knocks him out cold, and still finds time to scold Nick for thinking she was actually dead. And as if that wasn't enough of a bombshell, she drops another. That car accident that supposedly killed Nick's dad? Total setup, an ambush. While Nick tries to process this full-on soap opera episode of Family Feud, Wesen edition, Juliet is out cold in a hospital bed, peacefully in a coma, blissfully unaware her undead mother-in-law just walked back into their lives. Monroe and Rosalee, the unofficial Google of magical potions, discover a hexenbeast poking around for the same ingredients they are, and trust trust me, that's never a good sign. Back at the trailer, Kelly gives Nick the VIP tour, showing off weapons, ancient books, and enough family secrets to make him question if this inheritance is a blessing or a curse. The clues from the ship lead them to a company called GQR Industries. One look at the murder scene, and Kelly calls it. This is the work of a mauvais dentes. Yep, ugly and evil. Basically a psychopathic feline that makes the Reapers look like Boy Scouts. The FBI shows up to pretend they're going to do something, but the beast has already killed one agent, kidnapped another, and is now playing a deadly game of cat and mouse with Nick. And to top it all off, Kelly reveals the world's on the brink of chaos, because the royal families know Nick has one of the 7 keys. Together, they form a map that leads to a medieval treasure.
If the royal family's got a hold of it, they could control the world.
If you thought Nick's life was already a mess, buckle up, it gets worse. Our sweet Monroe happens to witness Juliet in a steamy makeout session with none other than Renard. Yep, Nick's boss. Naturally, Monroe finds himself in that classic moral dilemma. Do I tell Nick or pretend I just saw a ghost? Of course, he tells him, because he's a stand-up guy. And Nick, he loses it. I mean, it's not every day your girlfriend wakes up from a coma just to cheat on you with your boss. Meanwhile, Adeline comes back to town more toxic than ever. She plays innocent in front of Hank, apologizes, acts all sweet, and minutes later, he's getting beat up by a bunch of Hoonjägers. Because in this universe, being a villain comes with consistency. You're either bad or really bad. During an interrogation, Adeline not only confirms she's working for GQR Industries, but also rubs it in Nick's face that she knows about the key and demands he hand it over. As a bonus, she drops the bomb that she was the one who tried to kill Aunt Marie on the orders of a very familiar royal, our beloved Renard. And just to spice things up even more, Eric, Renard's full-blood royal brother, gives him 48 hours to get the key, or else everything falls apart. Literally. Juliet, still emotionally wrecked from the spell, decides it's time to have the talk with Nick, just to say she's in love with someone else, without even knowing why. The result? Nick moves in with Monroe, who by now totally deserves a Best Friend of the Year award. And if Nick still had any doubts, here comes the final blow. Monroe shows him a news report on TV, and the moment we've all been waiting for. Nick on fire. He's going all in, completely unhinged, and well, Monroe better brace himself because Nick is ready to punch the captain's face in. Meanwhile, 4 Hoonjägers are found dead in a parking lot, and not just dead, smashed to pieces. Security footage shows they were chasing someone, possibly Monroe, who was busy playing Mission Impossible at Adeline's hotel. Then comes Rosalee with that heart-wrenching truth bomb. It was Renard who woke Juliet from her coma, and the spell meant to heal her came with a spicy little side effect, a mutual, uncontrollable lust. This all peaks in the iconic scene where Juliet empties 5 bullets inside her own house, everyone aiming at Renard, everyone missing on purpose, because that's what toxic love looks like. To top off the chaos bingo, Renard breaks into Nick's desk, rummages around for the key, and finds it, because let's face it, we already know Nick's kind of a dummy, but apparently, he's even dumber than we thought when it comes to hiding stuff. Hank discovers the break-in and it all blows up. The final showdown happens at the same spot where Nick once fought that mauvais dentes, and plot twist, Renard flat out confesses he's royal, Eric's half-brother, but swears he's on Nick's side. For now, he even returns the key, because together they have a shot. Apart, they're ground beef for the Virat.
I'm giving it back to you. It's why I called you here.
Monroe and Rosalee might have found a cure for the forbidden love curse, but it requires one ingredient you can't get on Uber Eats, the cat from the original potion, which, minor detail, Nick already killed. So what's the plan? Nick does what any sensible person would do, throws himself into a purification potion, beautiful scene, convulsing, foaming at the mouth, and Renard and Juliet looking on like, did we just kill him? And that's how it ends, with Nick on the floor, shaking like jello in a blender, while the most toxic love triangle on TV threatens to destroy Portland, romance, and everyone's last nerve. Portland, just when you think this city can't surprise you anymore, the undead show up in the middle of the street, literally, while Nick and Juliet are deep in their telenovela moment, gazing into each other's eyes and remembering they're still in love. Chaos breaks loose in the city, because let's be honest, Portland never disappoints. Dead people start crawling out of their graves, and no, not to pay overdue bills, but to wreak havoc and attack anything in sight. Our first Walking Dead of the day is Richard Mulpus, a guy who had been officially dead for 3 days, but suddenly decided to get up and throw punches at cops. And no, it's not a hangover. To make things even creepier, there's Lily O'Hara, who wakes up in the middle of her own autopsy. Imagine the coroner's face. Yeah, I'd quit on the spot. Nick, our beloved Grimm, dives into Aunt Marie's books and finds the culprit, the Crasher Mortel, a literal spit fiend Wesen who turns people into zombies with a toxic loogie. The victims go through 4 stages: paralysis, total mind trip, fake death, and finally, full-blown psychotic rage. And who's running this circus? None other than a top-hatted smirking dude named Baron Samedi. He struts around Portland like it's a catwalk for the zombie apocalypse, hand-picking his victims with all the flair only a flamboyant villain can pull off. Amid this collective breakdown, tow truck driver Al Shaner goes missing. And of course, the clues lead Nick and Hank straight to that lovely hotspot of everything shady, the shipyards. Meanwhile, in the much cuter, but equally messy, subplot, Adeline's over in Europe making blood pacts with Stefania to get her powers back. Frau Petsch tries to warn her it's a bad idea, but really, whoever listens to advice? And to top off the madness, Juliet, after months of denial, finally sees Monroe, Rosalee, and Bud go full Woj. Spoiler alert, she doesn't freak out. In fact, she takes it surprisingly well. Maybe because after everything she's been through, watching people morph into creatures just doesn't hit as hard anymore. Oh, and to spice up the mess even more, Captain Renard gets a surprise visit from his charming brother, Prince Eric, the kind of relative you'd block on WhatsApp. He shows up with some good old-fashioned family matters, which naturally means veiled threats. If you thought the zombie madness was over, sorry to disappoint you. The city's overrun. 18 people vanish in 24 hours, including an entire busload. That's right, a whole bus just gone. Nick and Monroe manage to capture a zombie, who would have thought, and test an antidote. It requires 3 simultaneous injections. Basically, it's like a triple shot hangover cure. Does it work? Yes, it does. And he wakes up just long enough to spill the beans. There's a deluxe zombie holding pen inside some green containers at the docks. Of course, the docks, because where else? Meanwhile, Eric drops all pretense and tells Renard point blank he's in town for 2 reasons: to bring his brother back to the Royal Club and to snatch the key Nick's been guarding. Adeline, oh, she deserves a whole chapter of her own. She witnesses Stefania ripping the still beating heart out of Frau Petsch. Full-on Tarantino gore level, all part of a quaint little ritual to get her Hexen Beast powers back. And naturally, she seals her fate for good. Back at the containers, Nick, Hank, Monroe, Rosalee, and now Juliet realize they've walked into the classic setup. Congratulations! You're surrounded by a raging zombie horde. Everyone bolts in true run-for-your-lives fashion, but Nick, because of course it's Nick, gets separated from the group and ends up face-to-face with Baron Samedi. Guess what? He gets wrecked. The Cratcher Mortel delivers a brutal beatdown, drops Nick like a sack of potatoes, and then signs off with a fancy nod.
Good night, sweet Grimm.
And then, right in the middle of this season finale level mayhem, Nick has a light bulb moment. Wait, this is just a distraction. Of course, while everyone's busy dodging bites and staying off the zombie menu, who's pulling the real strings? Eric Renard, the captain's oh-so-charming little brother, shows up in Portland with all the subtlety of a grand piano falling from a 10th-story window. He's here to abduct the Grimm. The cops do show up, guns blazing and packing Rosalee's magical antidote, but surprise, Nick's already gone. Well, not gone, not dead. Just snatched like a high-priority Amazon delivery. Hank only finds Nick's phone, abandoned among the containers. And Baron? He's already en route to Austria, flying off with our hero neatly packaged under the alias Thomas Chirac, deceased, all thanks to a chemical cocktail so potent it'd give a Mexican drug cartel second thoughts: tetrodotoxin, scopolamine, and datura. But Nick isn't just anybody. He's a Grimm. So instead of turning into a run-of-the-mill zombie, he ends up in deluxe undead mode, catatonic, breathing, but looking like he's already crossed over. Monroe, sharp as ever, tracks Nick down to a bar that honestly looks straight out of a post-apocalyptic flick. Blood on the walls, wrecked furniture, groans echoing from the floor. Nick passed through like a hurricane and left an impression. And to make things worse, Nick breaks into a family's home. The dad locks him in the room, thinking that might help. Of course, it doesn't. By the time Hank and Monroe arrive, they find Nick clawing through wood with his bare hands. They try the antidote, but it's like giving chamomile tea to the Hulk. Grimm goes ballistic, beats everyone to a pulp. Monroe nearly gets turned into a rug. Hank almost loses his head until Juliet hits him with a massive dose of the antidote. Nick blacks out, but in that ominous way that makes everyone stare, thinking, is he dead? Not dead? And if he is, can we bury him for good? Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, plot twist. Eric Renard goes up in flames with his car. Who did it? None other than his dear little brother, Captain Sean Renard, who basically said, if anyone's taking out my brother, it's gonna be me. He saved Nick from becoming the royal family's Wesen pet. Nick wakes up, wrecked, injured, and with no clue what day it is. And of course, his friends do the classic thing. They hide the fact that he almost killed half the town in his zombie rampage.
Why?
That's got kind of a long answer attached to it.
If you thought Portland would catch a break after the zombie apocalypse, think again. Now the threat is exotic and straight out of a Filipino urban legend. Dana Thomas, a pregnant woman, shows up covered in blood with a surgical-like hole in her belly. The creepy part? The fetus is intact, but the amniotic fluid? Completely drained. Wu, who's known Dana since they were kids, goes straight into panic mode. The scene at the house? Claw marks on the window, blood everywhere, and reports of a sinister tick-tock sound during the attack. Nick and Hank initially suspect the husband, Sam Thomas, but he's got an alibi. Then Wu, deep in a Google rabbit hole, blurts out, "What if it's an aswang?" For Wu, it's a desperate guess. For Nick, it's just another Tuesday. And guess what? Bingo. Monroe and Rosalee confirm the aswang is real, a bizarre Filipino Wesen that feeds on amniotic fluid, sedating victims with valerian root. And here's a telenovela-level twist. They usually target their own relatives. So who's the monster? The sweet old mother-in-law. Yep, Lanny, Sam's mom, who was staying at a shady motel and decided to stop by her son's house to finish the job. Wu gets there first and has the dubious honor of witnessing the aswang in full attack mode. He shoots it down, killing the creature mid-woj in one of the most traumatizing transformations imaginable. The aftermath? Wu's mind crashes. Total shutdown. He's admitted to a psych ward. Officially, he's the hero who saved a family. Unofficially, he's stuck in "I saw something no one should ever see" mode.
Baby's gonna be okay.
Just when you think you've seen it all, Grimm throws an episode at you that blends supernatural childbirth, international escape, and war logistics intense enough to make John Wick break a sweat. Meanwhile, on the other side of the globe, Adeline Shade is, literally, giving birth to the apocalypse. Alone? Of course not. She's hiding out in a cabin that looks like it came straight from a supernatural fugitive Airbnb catalog, being tended to by Meisner, that resistance agent who looks like he's probably killed a man just by staring. The baby arrives, and it's no ordinary baby. This child comes out breaking the rules, moving objects, shaking the house, and probably connecting to the Wi-Fi. It's basically the genetic love child of a resurrected Hexen beast and a royal prince, a masterpiece of supernatural engineering. Obviously, Prince Victor sends the Verat squad to capture mother and child. Too bad the resistance is playing on nightmare mode. A mysterious woman shows up, slaps logic in the face, takes down 6 agents like it's a scene from Fast and Furious, and gets everyone on a plane. Destination, spoiler, not Cancun. They were headed to Sao Paulo until the location gets compromised because, of course, plans never work out in this show. And then, plot twist, the pilot turns out to be American and randomly decides to fly Adeline to Portland. Because yeah, that's what you do when you're running from a murderous cult. Switch continents like you're switching Uber rides. Meanwhile, Monroe and Rosalee are knee-deep in their epic wedding planning saga, which honestly sounds more dangerous than facing a Wesen. And Nick, he's losing it. Being the best man when anyone could out you as a Grimm is like being a vegetarian at a Texas barbecue. The solution? Sunglasses. Yep, apparently a Grimm in Ray-Bans doesn't scare anyone. But the drama isn't over. Adeline's plane lands with all the finesse of a B-movie emergency landing on a makeshift runway in the middle of nowhere. And just when you think it can't get more chaotic, Kelly steals a car and takes off, full-on Mad Max style, storming through a thunderstorm toward Portland with mother and baby on board. Cue the flashbacks. Kelly remembers Nick's childhood when she sent him away to protect him from trouble. A classic, the past is catching up with me moment. And who does Adeline turn to when she arrives? Sean Renard, of course. Because if there's anyone who's both the cause and solution to all problems, it's that man. She knows trusting him is about as safe as sticking a fork in an outlet. But hey, priorities. And to top it all off, Nick gets a phone call. From who? His mother. Yep, Kelly Burkhardt. Because clearly the universe decided to synchronize everything. And no, this isn't just coincidence. And because Portland never disappoints, Verat agents quickly figure out where Renard lives. Guess what happens? Brawls, gunfire, and death everywhere. Kelly, who clearly didn't come to play, takes out 2 Hun Jaegers. The group flees and hides at Monroe and Rosalee's place. But little Diana decides it's showtime and triggers every clock in the house to ring at once. Meanwhile, the villain in a suit arrives. Prince Victor, looking like the kind of guy who does couples therapy with a knife on the table. And he's not alone. He brings an offer that would make any therapist lose faith in humanity. Either Nick hands over the baby, or everyone he loves becomes a statistic. Renard, always a fan of controversial decisions, agrees to give up his daughter. Adeline naturally breaks down, but plot twist, it's all a setup. Kelly and Nick intercept the plane, go full action sequence, and rescue baby Diana.
She's still asleep.
Let's hope she stays that way for a while.
After the storm, Nick is just trying to live his life. Monroe and Rosalee are in the final stages of wedding prep, and Trubel is dealing with the fact that she found out she's a Grimm in the most traumatic way possible. possible, defending herself from an abusive Wesen during her teenage years. Because if there's going to be drama, let it come with a punch. But of course, Josh Porter shows up, a man who thinks his father has lost his mind because he keeps talking about monsters. Spoiler, he's not crazy. In fact, he's sharper than most politicians. When the Verat try to kill them both at the hotel, his father, Rolek, proves he's no fragile old man and shoots one of them dead. The thing is, Rolek is at death's door. Before passing on, he gives Nick the ultimate Grimm heirloom, a whole collection of ancient artifacts, including a mystical key. Nick finds out that this key is one of 7. Together, they form a map to the most mysterious treasure in Grimm history, hidden deep in the Black Forest. Think Indiana Jones, but with monsters. Josh, who started off thinking his dad was nuts, embrace your legacy, even if you have no idea what's going on 70% of the time. Welcome to the world of Grimms, Josh. Sanity is optional here. Nick, our perpetually sleep-deprived hero, thought his biggest challenge would be surviving Monroe and Rosalee's wedding. Wishful thinking. Rosalee's sister, who's clearly never heard of therapy, rips apart the wedding dress, claiming it was cursed. Let's be honest, that's just a fancy excuse to be a total nightmare. While everyone scrambles to find a new dress, across town, Adeline, yes, her again, the queen of dirty tricks, decides it's payback time. And not just any petty revenge. She whips up her signature transformation potion and turns herself into Juliet. Then, in a move straight out of a telenovela, she heads to Nick's house, seduces him, and, brace yourself, steals his Grimm powers. And because when it rains, it pours, guess who walks in on all of this? The real Juliet. She steps through the door, only to find a flaming mess and the smoldering ashes of her dignity scattered all over the carpet. Perfect timing for a wedding, right? The ceremony begins. Everything's beautiful, heartwarming, until Trouble shows up. And if you thought she was just another guest, big mistake. Now that Nick is powerless, basically just another tax-paying human who can't see Wesen for what they really are, Trouble steps in. She has no idea Wesen wear masks. So when a bunch of them reveal their true forms mid-vows, she flips. Think of that one friend who causes drama at the wedding because she spotted her ex. Chaos erupts, Wesen running wild, guests panicking, the DJ abandoning ship. She begs Nick to take the antidote, but amid the chaos, the vial falls and shatters, and then comes the big reveal. Nick is just an ordinary guy now.
Can you see me? Are you evoked? Oh my god.
And the heavy burden of being a Grimm, it falls on Trouble. She barely arrived and already scored herself a high-risk job, without benefits. Nick, our favorite Grimm, gets his powers back through a rather sketchy ritual with Adeline. Yeah, there's always room for worse. He barely steps back into the game, and Trouble's already knocking. Meanwhile, Monroe and Rosalee are starring in their own horror spin-off, the perfect couple being hunted by a xenophobic Wesen cult known as the Secundum Naturae Ordinum Wesen. Basically, a bunch of Wesen fanatics losing it over interspecies marriages. As if the electric bill wasn't enough of a nightmare, now they've got supernatural neo-Nazis on their tail. And of course, to complete the mood, there's that hint of rural horror. Young couples start vanishing along Oregon's highways. And no, this isn't an episode of Supernatural, though it could be. The only survivor, Sulika Turner, tells a tale that begins with a staged car crash and ends with her husband being taken by creatures. Because of course, it's creatures. This is Grimm, not the Discovery Channel. Nick and Hank, who can't resist a good mystery, spot a pattern. The crashes are just bait. The trail leads them to a nightmarish junkyard that, surprise, turns out to be the site of human sacrifices by the Fansigars, basically snake-like Wesen who worship the goddess Kaylee and strangle their victims with their tongues before burying them alive. The climax, Nick has to rely on his powers, except he's not even sure they're really back. But in true do-or-die fashion, they kick in just in time. Fansigars defeated, victims rescued, and Nick barely has a second to enjoy his restored powers before remembering that the world's a never-ending mess. Days later, Juliet is deep into her "it's not me, it's my Hexen Beast" side phase. The twist, she's not just accepting it, she's loving it, strutting around with her new powers like she just scored a VIP pass to hell. And the cherry on top, picking bar fights just for kicks. Nick, like every guy who can't handle a powerful woman, decides the best place for her is behind bars. Real romantic. Meanwhile, we're introduced to a camp that's basically a spiritual retreat, but for teenage Wesen learning to control their instincts. Only this peaceful getaway quickly turns into an episode of Criminal Minds when bodies start dropping left and right. The killer? Maggie, daughter of the camp's founder, who's decided she wants to be the supernatural version of Hannibal Lecter. Tired of being treated as weak just because she's a girl, Maggie sets out to prove herself by murdering people. Because who needs therapy when you've got homicide, right? At the climax, Maggie attacks a poor drifter. Monroe tries the classic let's talk this out, but she's way past reasoning. Nick steps in, and it ends with Maggie dying in her father's arms. And since tragedy loves company, Juliet's genie torches Mick's trailer, destroying all his research inside. That's right, decades of Grimm knowledge up in flames.
What have you done?
Just trying to stay warm, Nick.
I don't have anybody to hold me anymore.
Total and utter chaos unfolds. Juliet, now officially in her full-blown villain mode, sets a trap for Kelly Burkhardt and hands her over to the Hunjagers. The result? Kelly loses her head, literally. And Nick, he gets his mother's head delivered in a box. Yes, a box. The plot kicks into overdrive. Kenneth and his crew abduct Diana. Consumed by rage, Nick hunts down Kenneth and adds decapitation to his list of accomplishments. Revenge in this world isn't a dish best served cold. It's a head rolling down the pavement. But the biggest shock comes when Juliet returns, without a hint of remorse. Nick faces the classic toxic ex dilemma and hesitates. Just when it seems like he might launch into a "I still love you" speech, Juliet strikes. Plot twist, Truble, channeling her inner Buffy the Hexenby Slayer, swoops in out of nowhere and lands an arrow right in the witch's chest.
Goodbye, Juliet.
Game over, Juliet. She dies in Nick's arms, giving him plenty of time to reflect on his life choices and how his standards for relationships clearly need a serious overhaul. And just to top it all off, mysterious agents show up and take Truble away, because in this universe, peace is never an option. Nick wakes up in classic disaster mode, house trashed, no girlfriend, no bestie, zero dignity, and to top it off, no mom's head. Literally, someone thought it was cute to take Mama Parker's head as a souvenir. Enter Hank, the best unpaid therapist a Grimm could ask for. Nick drops the bombshell. The ex, supposedly dead, came back with a killer twist. And Truble, she took her down with a crossbow bolt, then vanished into thin air. To complete the chaos bingo, Nick learns that not only was his home destroyed, but he was drugged, kidnapped, and both Juliet and Truble were part of the abduction package. Prime suspect, Agent Chavez, who, surprise twist, is a Wesen, because normal people just don't exist in this show. Meanwhile, three neighbors just trying to sleep and pay their property taxes show up dead. Captain Renard tries to play HR and suggests Nick take a few days off. But guess what? Grimm's got vengeance in his veins. Vacation denied. In the midst of the crisis, Adeline goes into labor. Because why settle for mild chaos when you can go full apocalypse? Nick rushes to the hospital while Bud, clearly not getting paid enough for this, tries to keep things together. Result: baby Kelly is born, named in honor of the decapitated grandma. Nothing says family love like a Grimm tribute. And just when you think things can't get worse, Nick finds Chavez bleeding out in a warehouse. Her last words before turning into a Friday night tragedy: they're coming to Portland. It's war. Months later, Portland has basically become a branch office of the apocalypse. Enter Black Claw, a Wesen terrorist group that doesn't take criticism, doesn't do diplomacy, and definitely doesn't tolerate anyone left breathing. They're tagging the whole city with their symbol, 4 black claw marks. And the good guys? Being played, of course. Just when you think this is it, guess who shows up? Juliet, only rebooted. Platinum blonde hair, zero emotions, and the psychopathic ninja skill set to match. She wipes the floor with them. Nick stands there with a "did my brain just crash?" and as if things weren't bad enough. The Wesen Council? Completely wiped out. Only Alexander is left to tell the tale. Black Claw wants world domination, starting with the City of Coffee and ironic mustaches. Nick finally faces off with the new Juliet, now going by Eve. She's sharp to the point and cold as an overdue bill. She lays it out. Juliet's dead. I'm a weapon. Get over it. And just to hammer the point home, mid-meeting, another Black Claw death squad storms in, and Eve takes them all down like she's swiping away phone notifications. Nick realizes he's dealing with something way beyond his emotional capacity. Therapy ain't gonna cut it anymore, buddy. On the other side of the Atlantic, in Germany, antique dealer Felix stumbles upon what every nerdy collector dreams of: original Grimm books, complete with medieval maps and secrets that clearly weren't meant to be out in the open. Of course, in this series, whoever finds a rare book doesn't tend to live long. The Black Claw shows up, kills the appraiser, and then Felix himself. Because let's face it, being a librarian here is a high-risk profession. Before kicking the bucket, Felix manages to send some photos to his most trusted contact. That's right, Monroe. Naturally, Nick gets pulled in when he learns these books might be the key to saving the world, leveling up, or dying trying. During the investigation, they discover the books were shipped as cargo. But surprise, at the warehouse, 2 Black Claw Anubi are doing their best Killer Jackal cosplay and have slaughtered half the staff to get their hands on the books. A fierce brawl breaks out, ending with Nick and Monroe cracking open the most valuable valuable chest since that one every pirate movie has. Inside, 20 pristine Grimm books, ancient maps, and because it wouldn't be complete without an Indiana Jones twist, 3 ornate keys. Together with the ones Nick already has, the keys form a complete map pointing to a treasure buried 800 years ago in Germany's Black Forest. And spoiler alert, it was hidden by the Templars. Surrounded by bones, they realized the Crusaders weren't into burying things. They were all about hiding stuff in style. With no flashlight, Monroe, now an honorary detective, spots 7 skulls in a circle staring into the void, and in the middle, a chest that makes any RPG loot look like pocket change. The 5 keys open 5 locks, but naturally 2 stay sealed, because if there's no mystery, it's not Grimm, it's just medieval CSI. And like any horror movie character who's never seen a horror movie, they decide to take the chest with them. Cue the angry mob with torches, pitchforks, and a thirst for local justice. Monroe goes full-blood dad to help them escape, but ends up getting bitten. They make it back to Portland, with Monroe basically relying on the power of positive thinking for antibiotics. But guess what? The chest doesn't open with brute force or even WD-40. It's drama-based security. Nick cuts his finger and finds out his blood is literally the genetic key. The 800-year-old seal breaks and, surprise, inside is an old stick. Yep, the world nearly ended over a nicely wrapped twig. Except it's not just any twig. Monroe, delirious, touches it and poof, instant healing. Infection gone. Wolverine-level regeneration. Everyone's just standing there like, yeah, that wasn't in the manual. Meanwhile, in the side plot soap opera, Black Claw checks off another villain trope by assassinating mayoral candidate Andrew Dixon just to slide Sean Renard into the job. Lucian shows up offering power and corruption, a sort of Wesen mafia linked in, and just like that, Portland turns into a supernatural game of Risk. And just when you thought things couldn't get any messier, welcome to the total collapse of Portland. Renard wins the election with Adelind glued to his side, leaving Nick with that look like he just realized the couch is a luxury. He's bunking in the underground bunker now. Black Claw drops all pretense and decides subtlety is for the weak. Monroe's practically ready to launch an online course called How to Scare Off Your Stalkers with Your Best Bloodbad Face. And Hank, poor guy, gets thrown straight into the fire, literally framed for murder. Because here, corruption doesn't even try to hide. It's got same-day delivery. Nick finds out the entire precinct has turned into a Wesen Comic-Con. And guess who's the guest of dishonor? Yep, him. It's all a setup to wipe out any Grimm still breathing. And the only lead? Tony. You know, that criminal who barely ranks as a filler episode villain. Monroe nearly bites his head off just to get an address, which, surprise, is a trap. Meanwhile, Hadrian's Wall, total wipeout. Black Claw stormed in, guns blazing, tore everything apart, and even took Meisner as a bonus. Oh, and Renard personally makes sure Meisner doesn't walk out of there. The city flips into full-on zombie apocalypse mode, where even kids have superpowers and use them to settle their parents' arguments. Diana, the cutest and most terrifying little psychopath ever, kills Rachel with a simple, "I don't like you near my dad." Parental controls? Never heard of them. Adelind becomes Bonaparte's emotional hostage. The Zauberbius turned mob boss basically goes, "Marry me or I'll break you, and take the kids too." Romance sure has evolved, huh? Nick gets beat up, arrested, tortured, and just to make things worse, Bonaparte kidnaps his baby, with a little indirect help from Nick's own daughter. Family. Am I right? Could have been a Maury episode. Eve, Wu, and Trubel mount a counterattack, but Bonaparte's so overpowered he knocks Eve down with one hand tied behind his back. Desperate, Nick turns to the magic stick which, guess what, saves Eve, but nearly shatters her in the process. She wakes up in a daze and mutters, "Juliet?" Yep, sweetheart. The trauma came back hard. Meanwhile, Black Claw tightens the net, storms the loft, and Nick and the gang are forced into the sewers. Bonaparte thinks he's got this in the bag, forgetting one tiny detail. Grimms don't go down easy, and in the most shameless cliffhanger ever, the final showdown looms. Nick, alone in the loft, face to face with Bonaparte. Because if you're going out, might as well do it with slow motion, dramatic music, and an epic beatdown. After his destructive rampage through the North Precinct, our beloved Nick is now officially a deluxe fugitive, living, wait for it, in the sewers. Yep, straight out of an 80s B-movie protagonist handbook. Meanwhile, Renard, who clearly has zero shame, takes full control of the police force. Small detail, there's an arrest warrant with Nick's name on it. Enter Monroe, the kind of friend everyone dreams of, along with Eve and her Hexenbeast magic. They dust off that random hat from the verfluchted Zwillingsschwester. Yeah, it sounds like a German insult, but it's just magic. And voila, Nick turns into a perfect Renard clone.
Pretty good, huh?
Yeah? Yeah.
In disguise, Nick goes live on Portland TV, delivering a jaw-dropping statement. Half the city was left stunned, the other half reached for popcorn. Renard announces he's ditching his political career to personally lead the investigation into the attack. Touching, right? But then, plot twist, the spell works a little too well. When the real Renard finds out he's become a viral meme, he snaps. He storms Nick's loft, and of course, it's the classic "who's the real one?" showdown. Only problem, the stubborn spell won't wear off. Enter Diana. Yep, the tiny, demonic witch child powerhouse. She looks at both men and is like, "You really think you can fool me?" With a single touch, the enchantment shatters, and Nick goes back to being Nick. A few months go by. Everything seems perfect at first, but then strange symbols begin to appear in mirrors all across the city. Eve, who clearly skipped all horror movie lessons, decides to smear some Hexenbeast blood on one of them, and bam, portal to another dimension wide open. And what does she find on the other side? A nightmare straight out of the Discovery Channel. A dark, twisted forest crawling with Wesen, who have no clue what self-control is and stay permanently watched. Leading the pack, the Zerstwerer, a skeletal freak wielding a staff that looks like it came from a doomsday yard sale. Nick, who's constantly telling Eve don't do that, does the exact same thing and jumps in after her. He discovers this place is like Jurassic Park from hell, except here, humans are livestock. That's right, livestock. Then the locals drop some fantastic news. The Zerstwerer is hunting for a Shafat, a child bride basically. And guess what? The description matches. Diana, the poor girl, can't catch a break. As if that weren't enough, Nick starts turning into a Wesen. That's right, folks. Even Grimm DNA doesn't work right in this place. After brawling with a bunch of psychotic Wesen, they finally come face to face with the Zerstwerer. And plot twist, he's not trying to kill anyone yet. He wants them alive for some evil master plan, which likely includes sacrifice, destruction, or maybe launching a new Netflix series. We've officially reached peak chaos. Zerstwerer uses Nick as a human anchor and breaks through the mirror straight into Portland. And to make sure everything goes according to his demonic plan, he gets a little help from Diana, who, while trying to help, ends up making things way easier for the Horned One by handing him the magic stick. On Earth, Zerstwerer takes human form, but don't let that fool you into thinking he's suddenly friendly. He slaughters two poor guys at a gas station just to steal their clothes. Grand Theft Auto, Portland edition basically. And who is he after? Diana, of course, because heaven forbid a child have 5 minutes of peace in this show. Meanwhile, the team is losing it. Renard taps into some Russian contacts who claim to know everything about Zerstwerer. Adeline, already a veteran in supernatural messes, hides Diana and Kelly in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, protected by a spell involving 7 herbs. Yup, grandma-level protection spell vibes. Monroe, Rosalee, and Eve dig deeper and realize that Zerstwerer's staff might just be the staff of Moses. Because why not? Now the Bible is part of the show's lore. And spoiler alert, that stick Nick found in the Black Forest, it's the final piece. If Zerstwerer gets it, game over. And guess what? The bony demon crashes into the precinct, not to file a report. He's there for a bloodbath. Bullets? Useless. Tasers? Nada. Pepper spray? Might as well be glitter. Result: Hank, Wu, and half the department become statistics. Who's left standing? Nick, the Highlander of the series, mysteriously shielded by the staff. Nick is on his knees, screaming in despair, surrounded by the bodies of his friends, realizing that yes, maybe the world really is going to end. We kick things off in full nightmare mode. Nick is in total despair, trying to bring Hank and Wu back to life using that magic stick that once worked miracles. Spoiler alert, not this time. No pulse.
Come on, Hank, you're not gonna die. You can't die. Why isn't this working?
And just when things couldn't get worse, bam! Trouble shows up out of nowhere. Right as hell itself decides to open a branch inside the spice shop. Zerstwerer crashes in, smashes everything in sight, and just for kicks, kills Eve. Yup, dead. No tears, no goodbyes. What's left of the gang retreats to the cabin, their makeshift HQ, where Diana and Kelly are hidden away. That's where the craziest plan since someone thought shooting arrows at supernatural beasts was a good idea is born. The Force du Sang, a potion so deadly it needs the blood of a Grimm, a Wesen, and a Hexenbeast. Easy, right? Just a little hellfire cocktail. But as always, kids in this show don't come to play. Diana drops the bomb. Zerstwerer doesn't just want her, he wants Kelly too. And to make things worse, that beloved beloved stick of Nick's. Turns out, it's basically a mystical AirTag, tracking everyone straight into deluxe damnation. Guess what? Zersturer invades the cabin. What follows is a season finale level massacre. Monroe goes down, Adeline takes a one-hit kill, Trouble and Renard fall almost together, and Nick, watching it all crumble like a telenovela finale. Then comes the turbo plot twist. The demon offers a deal. Give me the stick and I'll bring everyone back. And yeah, Nick actually considers it. Who wouldn't? But hold up, VIP Ghost Squad to the rescue. Mama Kelly and Aunt Marie pop in to slap some sense into our stubborn Grimm. Ultimate revelation, Zersturer can't just grab the stick. Someone has to willingly hand it over. This whole bloodbath, just psychological warfare to break Nick.
I'm just so thankful you're all here.
And now the grand reveal. The real power isn't in the potion, or the stick, or even supernatural CrossFit. It's in the Grimm lineage. Nick and Trouble are basically the mystical power banks of humanity. So in full ancestral Super Saiyan mode, Nick jams the stick into Zersturer's chest and ends him. For good. No speeches, no second chances, no redemption DLC. And when the demon dies, boom. Full-on video game reset. Nick's back at the exact moment Diana was opening the portal. But this time, he slams the door shut and tells the devil, not today. 20 years later, Nick's chilling. He's now an author, of course. Turned the Grimm journal into a bestseller that everyone thinks is just fiction. He's living happily with Adeline and their kids, Kelly, now a Grimm, and Diana, who's basically a walking cheat code. And to wrap it all up with style, we see Kelly, Diana, and wait for it, Monroe and Rosalee's triplets heading off on a new mission, because being a Grimm, the war may end, but the shift never does.